Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I am Tamara Johnson Shealy. Good morning. It is a beautiful, sunny, very beautiful, sunny Saturday morning here in the ATL. It is absolutely beautiful after days and days of rain and cold weather. Today is absolutely beautiful. Let's see who's going to join us. My trusty co-host is taking a little break today, but I have the beautiful Miss Robby Caban. Good morning, Robby.
Good morning, Miss Lovely. Thank you for
Good
the
morning.
compliments. Good morning. I'm
Yeah.
excited. It's sunny too, and spring is upon us. Thank you.
Yes. Like we had enough of this winter, haven't we, Robby? Enough already.
I have a house, so I have to heat the house from my house. So people are like, little heaters. I'm like, yeah, I don't heat the whole house. I take the space heater with me
It's wherever you go, that's where you're going to keep it warm.
right behind me.
Hey, whatever works. This is Georgia, so it won't be cold much longer.
I'm a
We'll go from cold to hot, right?
so one income household here.
So how's it been going, Robby? I have an announcement for those that don't know. I am officially a candidate for the United States Senate. I am super excited. I am ready to serve. I am ready to fight for all Georgians. I am ready to fight for, as our Bishop Greg Fan says, the least, the last, the lost, and the left out. I'm ready.
That's a lot of L's.
That's a lot of L's, right? That's a lot of L's. But yeah, it's time. Georgia needs change, and there's a lot of candidates in my race, is what I call it. There's a lot of candidates in this race, and you know what? I'm ready. I'm ready to serve. I'm ready to fight it out. I'm ready to talk about the issues. So let's take this campaign. Let's go to Washington. Let's go to Washington and really make some real change, Robby.
I'm excited for us as a collective because when we
Mhm.
have a variety of candidates and candidates that will actually speak truth, non-traditional candidates, not this Democratic light. Because I'm always going to vote Democrat if I vote, but I want a choice. And people
Mhm.
like you, they're influencers. Your influencers is, what social media calls it, because regardless of whether or not the outcome is exactly what we want, your actions are going to influence the outcome either way. So it's kind of a win-win, but
Mhm.
hopefully it'll be a win-win-win.
Win, win, win. Amen. We're receiving that. I know you have a guest in the lobby. You have a couple guests today. But let's see. Miss Yvette, welcome to the broadcast.
How y'all doing today?
Great, great.
Talk about an influencer. Talk about a person making change. Miss Yvette Avery. She has a story. She's been on your show before, and she's
Mhm.
back with a. I don't want to say with a vengeance, but is that okay? Yvette, for those of you who don't know, actually, Yvette, it's your story. So give them the backdrop.
All right, for the ones who don't know, I am Yvette Avery, a former employee of Delta Airlines who was a little over a year ago suspended, then subsequently fired for trying to organize the ramp and cargo workers with a union. They used the guise of my other job at UPS that I had before I started Delta, and that was on my resume and on my application. They use that as an excuse to say, well, it's a conflict of interest between these jobs. So now, 7 years later, you have to choose between your two employers. So for me, that was not an option. I chose to stay at both, and that's where the termination came in. So it's still a fight. Continuing on with that fight, I will not let up until the victory is won, both personally and for the workers at Delta Airlines to be unionized.
So let me ask you, Yvette, before you dive in, Robbie. They were demanding, and I've heard the story, but for those that haven't, in an economy where people are working 1, 2, 3 jobs, what was
Correct.
it that how can they make such a demand on you? Everybody's household is different, and if you were able to come to work and perform accordingly, how could they make such a demand on you?
Well, that's because we don't have the coverage, of course, of a union. Yes, one job should be enough, but
Mhm.
myself, as well as a lot of other coworkers, were in the same situation where we were considered ready reserve. So we have no medical, dental, or vision benefits. It's hard to necessarily become full time. It takes a while at Delta to do that. So many of them have to work more than one job in order to be able to take care of their families and have the health insurance that they need.
What a lot of people don't know about the airline industry, and Yvette, that was a great background, is that it's really an industry like any other industry, you know, and it's gone through deregulation. So the after effects of that are legacy carriers, you know, large scale business corporations, basically. Most people don't think of the airlines that way, but that's what it is. It's like the real estate industry or any other industry, right? The banking industry. And so these legacy carriers kind of have territories, and they sort of compete with one another, but not really. They're making the most, and they get to dictate to the bottom, right? Sub carriers, small carriers, alliances, and all of those people that continue that trickle down get less and less wages. And it's interesting because even in the legacy carriers, and Delta, Yvette's former corporation, I'm very familiar with it. There's a hierarchy there too. You know, there's executives who, she probably works for the airlines, the lady who just said that.
Yeah.
There's executives who have contracts, meaning they're represented, they're protected, right? You have a legally bound contract where the terms of your employment are enforceable and you're protected in the law, in the legal system. And then the secondary representation, particularly at Yvette's former employer, Delta, are the pilots, who are a large group, predominantly male. Everybody below that is a different demographic, you know, what they call below wing employees. Yvette was at the counter, the front face, there's the ramp, there's the tickets, there's a variety. And it's interesting because those people are not represented. They do not have contracts whatsoever. They can't organize or say, we want to come up against management and say, we want to negotiate, these are the terms we want for our employment, whether it's medical or dental.
That's a lot of L's. That's a lot of L's, right? That's right.
All right about that. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. So in essence, what you have is kind of a 1 to 9%, sort of, and then everyone else. And it's
Right.
fascinating if you can take the emotion out of it and look at it, because the airport is Georgia's largest employer, meaning the revenue out of the airport. That's why we have the state and the city arguing on who's going to control that funding, because that's a lot of money to work with. And the surrounding communities around the airport, Fulton County and Clayton County, again, predominantly people of color. Ironically, the people below wing are predominantly people of color. Those are the people unrepresented. Those communities don't get the benefits from Georgia's largest employer. And it's fascinating because here you have someone like Yvette, good standing, good attendance, great model employee. She's doing what she has the right to do, right? Organized.
Correct.
But we work in a right to work state where anyone without a contract can be terminated for any reason, and you're walked off property. And that is what's happened to her. And it's happened to so many people, but it's happening to certain people. So Yvette, on that note, when you look at the airport this way, which is, you know, and a lot of things impact Georgia out of the airport. Like there were shots fired in the parking lot in the last 60 days in the Delta employee parking lot. No one's hearing about that. Coronavirus. Can you talk a little bit about not only the industry, but how does this impact, like what should we be thinking of as regular residents in terms of this industry, unregulated, where people might not even have the right, not even to organize, or can't even have the ability to organize without consequences, severe consequences, but can they call in sick? Like with today's health issues, can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. So like you mentioned, this is a at-will state. So like you say, right to hire, basically right to fire. So the employees are extremely afraid of losing their jobs. Right now, like we said, we have the coronavirus going on. People are afraid, and, you know, they're pumping it up, and they are very much so, you know, in their right to be, because in the travel industry, that's going to get hit the biggest, because people are moving, you know, from different countries coming around. You never know, you know, who you come in contact with, and things are not necessarily put in place to protect those employees, especially those without a contract. The ones who have a union have a voice, have some backing. People can stand up and try to fight and get some help and assistance to make sure that their health is, priority. But the companies that, like that, my former employee, only pilots are covered. So the rest of the employees basically have to fend for themselves. So calling out is not an option just because, you may be sick, without any repercussions. Just like you mentioned about the parking lot incident where the young lady was killed in the Delta lot by another employee. People were afraid to even speak about it because they were once again afraid for their jobs. They have no job protections there. And that's a really big issue for, in all aspects, public health, public safety. That's an issue within the airline industry, very much so, because people, are not even able to protect themselves at work or be protected, whether physically or through their health, because they're afraid of their job, losing it because they don't have those protections.
And make no mistake about it. Thank you for speaking plainly about that, Yvette. Yeah. Tamara, you have children. I live in Georgia. The cases for coronavirus came in from people who traveled from Italy. Mm. So we have a global economy right now. And I think some people, given this crisis, are contemplating, should we source regionally, still operate globally? But when you have this type of hierarchy at Georgia's largest employer, the airport, and when Yvette says that the pilots and the folks, the executives are protected by contract, what is the demographic of those pilots and those executives? Like 90%.
Predominantly
5%.
Yeah. Predominantly white male environment. Right.
So in essence, you have predominantly white males, a 1%. I mean, this is fascinating because it's almost equivalent to our entire economy. Exactly. Our largest revenue generator for Georgia, who's benefiting, who's protected, who's on the bottom. And the media, right, is not even, I'm so glad, I think later on we're going to have Dominique Huff, our local reporter who lives locally, sourced locally, who's unbought, like Tamara, unbossed and unbought. He writes about real news. There's a woman, the Supporter Report, Maria Supporter. She just wrote an article, and I bring media up not to shame her, but in general. She just wrote an article, and she wrote Delta gets it right or something like that. This has been happening to employees for years, decades. Yvette is now in a legal lawsuit to protect her own rights to organize, that she has the right to do on a national level. She's got a foot out of pocket, legal fees to fight this. If it were a pilot, because of his contract, if it were an executive, their legal fees would be covered, literally. But Maria Supporter doesn't know any of that. Maria Supporter is a white woman, a huge media. She writes these articles, and I have an issue with Maria because she's done this several times, but she's also sponsored by the airline. Is that not a conflict of interest? You're told that you have conflict of interest, but this lady can do this, again, a white woman? Wow. So in my opinion, labor, and I want to know what you think about this, Yvette. Do you think that it's because the labor industry, the union industry, it also has a hierarchy? We've got America's, modern day 2020 plantation, our airport. How do we unionize and protect the people from, that are 90% down when the unions also have a hierarchy? Should it be in-house? Like, what do you think?
Well, it definitely needs to start with the workers banding together, and they need to realize, and the realization is, even within a union, the workers individually are the union, but when you work together and stand together, that's when you can make the change. And if you see in the top, regardless, what organization it is, if they're not performing, just as we should vote out underperforming legislators or, any elected officials, the same goes true with our elected officials within a union. But first, the non-unionized employees have to stand together and realize that they need that change. I believe the workers know they need the change. They felt like, maybe the union needs to lead them there, but they need to realize they hold that power. They are the ones that's making all the profits for this organization, for the company. So therefore, they should be the ones who make the demands on all the money that they're making off their backs. So once they get that, it can be a grassroots effort for them just to pull together on their own, and then, seek that union that they need for the contract to actually protect them. But hey, coming together as regular workers every day, that's how it gets started.
So let me ask you a question, Yvette, about
Mhm.
labor and union and organizing, because that's what you were doing. You were organizing. You were trying to really bring everybody together so that
Correct.
you could have representation, and you could have the support you need, and you can get the salary. You can get better working conditions. All the things that labor is what it's about. Like so was the biggest challenge fear? Were they really that afraid to be organized? The root of why it's just been hard to make it happen.
Yeah, the biggest thing is definitely fear. It's a combination of like fear and, in some instances, just ignorance of what could be if you had a union. We are in the South, so a lot of people may not be familiar with the union and how it works. But trying to educate people when you're fighting against a company such as big as Delta, it's hard because they have the break rooms, they have all the areas where they can put all their anti-union information in, and it's hard for you to come in and tell people about the union in that same manner because you're being pushed to the side. They have, like I say, flyers, they had videos playing and all that when I was there, just down in the union, making it seem like the company is so much better with this open door policy that they claim to have. But in reality, people realize it's really not like that, but they're so scared because of, for example, what happened to me. Being out in the open, speaking up can cost you your job, and everyone is not in a position not to have a job. Some people, that's their only income. Like I said, in my case, I had two jobs, but I needed both of them. So it's put me in a situation where I never thought I would be at my age, trying to, get back into the trying to find a job at this age, being over 40, being a woman, it's discriminations out there. So being steady and, doing what you're supposed to do at work, thinking you're going to be good, it all came to a halt just because you're trying to fight for something that you rightfully can fight for through federal law. So it's a hard thing to overcome that fear for a lot of people.
Do you think they use you as an example? And then I'll just, just hearing these stories, I think more people need to hear your story. That's why we keep bringing you back. And I'm glad that you keep telling your story, and you're not going to be silent. You're not going to be quiet, because you're not the only one that has happened to. It's just you're in the forefront, and now you can really speak truth to power. So thank you, Yvette.
Definitely. I think I was definitely used for that example. I'm grateful in a way that I was, because I am already a union steward with the Teamsters here in Atlanta at Local 728. So I was already very familiar with what we can and can't do, the benefits of a union. So for me, I know nothing else but to fight. So it was great that they came, after me. But there's other people that have been terminated, all over the U.S. because of their union activity or being affiliated with unions. But they use other measures, just saying, like I say, conflict of interest with a job, or they'll find some minute thing that happened to use that as a reason to terminate, just so they can get out all the people who are union supporters. So it's not just me, but it's, I definitely will continue to voice what's going on until I can't voice it anymore.
You have to understand too, Tamara, that when people are hired at this company, because it's so huge, and the media is fascinating when they're literally in training, indoctrinated. They're hiring a certain personality, and right in training, the indoctrination starts about anti-union and at the training center. And so at every point, and so what winds up happening is, if something happens to someone and they get into an issue, if that person doesn't acquiesce and just basically take it, the thought is you should be grateful you work here. And if something's unacceptable to you, then the next thing you know, you're walked off property. You're cut out of your systems. You have sign-ins. And so what you have is something where it's like poof, and that's it. And now you don't have any recourse whatsoever except to go the legal route. And they have a bottomless, literally, fund for legal, for court, for suing people, for lawsuits. They have an in-house department and an out-house department. I speak from experience on this. I actually won my court case, but there's so many people that are at risk, and we don't really fully understand that the public part, this industry impacts public health. public safety, national security. You cannot afford to operate in a global economy. She's right. Cheryl Van Epp says we see indoctrination in other systems. So yeah, this is systematic. We cannot, though, as Georgians, afford in a global economy to allow our largest employer, the airport, to continue to operate in 2020 like a modern day plantation, where certain people have protections and everybody else doesn't. Certain people have legal recourse and everybody else doesn't. Certain people can call in sick and everybody else doesn't. Certain people can be shot to death in an employee parking lot and no one knows about it.
Right.
That is not safe. It's unethical. Some people would say it's racist. But to your point, Tamara, what the company does, not only in fighting the union, funds in fighting the union, but they also do this massive marketing campaign. We're going to fund the Civil Rights Museum while they are terminating a Black woman for exercising her legal rights.
Yes, that was very ironic last year.
This was happening. So it's a skew, it's just it's skew. And I'm gonna, full disclosure, I'm voting for Bernie Sanders. So, let me put that out there. That being said, Bernie stood up he stepped up in this. And I want to know Yvette, and Bernie Biden, cool. But that's kind of why he's resonating with people like me. I see him in all these areas talking about the structural components of systems, including labor has value. Those contracts for the executives and the pilot, they make bank. The protected people who are predominantly white males make bank. Okay, nobody else has that benefit. Nobody. Not at that company. So tell us a little bit about how you got connected with Bernie Sanders and what you think about the election, Bernie Biden, or anybody, whatever you think.
Well, definitely, he was a supporter of the campaign, the Delta Workers Unite campaign. So he did meet with some of the workers up north when he was out, even before the campaign for president at that time. He supported, along with a few other high-ranking officials in Congress, did stand up to say and send letters to Ed Bastian, the CEO, to let him know that they stood with the workers and they have every right to unionize. So for me, Bernie standing up for the unions is the reason why I'm a supporter for him as well. Because nobody, a lot of people are even scared to mention unions because they're in so many pockets of these corporations that, they're getting donations from them. So they're scared to speak out against them. So therefore, they can't say the same things. So we have that, even with our Lucy McBath here, being a former Delta flight attendant herself, my story kind of, went right past her when I mentioned it to her. It wasn't, something she really reacted to. But for me, because Delta has that stronghold on certain people because they feel like, they can't do any wrong. But they definitely have been doing a lot of wrong over the years and they need to answer for that. But I appreciate, like I said, people like Bernie Sanders that do speak out for union workers, that's come out to walk picket lines, has, no problem speaking out when it comes to workers' rights.
So let me do a full disclaimer because I got somebody over in my chat that is like literally just going ham. So he said that that Bernie didn't support reparations. Bernie needs to support reparations, and he does. So there's that's another conversation, and we're going to continue to have the reparations conversation. But today we're talking about labor and union. So stay with me, my ADOS family. I see y'all going ham over in the chat.
And say something about that?
Absolutely.
So I truly believe this. I don't say things I don't believe. I truly believe that when Bernie gets in office, he will support reparations. I don't think he can get in office stating that right now. I think that there's a portion, I know it's not enough, Tamara, I know we've talked about it. I know it's not, but I think that if he says that now, there's a component of white America, rural white America probably, that he will lose, that he needs. And those people don't fully understand reparations because they bought what people, an elite, they're shamed into their own poverty. They don't understand, they're pitted against minorities. And so they don't, and if he says it now, he'll never get in office. And we might wind up with Agent Orange again, or the second whatever Biden, who didn't take a stand. I mean, people went to South Carolina to meet with Biden just to tell him what's happening in our backyard with our mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, who is silent on what's happening at the airport, who is silent on what's happening with Yvette, who is also a Black woman. So
just know that he won't get the ADOS vote. He won't. Bernie is going to be damned if he do and damned if he don't. Okay, because he is going to lose the Black vote. This younger generation, this ADOS population, he doesn't have that base. That is why he is plummeting right now to Joe Biden. So it is to his detriment that he doesn't talk about reparations and he doesn't support reparations. This will not be good for him. I know that's not we're talking about labor unions and we're standing with Yvette right now.
But yeah, I mean, but the thing is, a lot of people, reparations, of course, I support wholeheartedly. And him being a Jewish man, he does realize the benefits that his people received after the Holocaust. So I'm with Robby saying that he's probably holding off, and I understand politically you have to make some adjustments until it's time, because otherwise, people will kick him to the curb. Because for us, making, healthcare a human right and having everybody covered is something, it can be part of our reparations because everybody deserves that. Going to school for free can be part of our reparations because people deserve that. Of course, we need something in addition, but we need to get our people as a whole in the entire country taken care of, and that's something that Bernie is willing to do. So that's something that, like I said, I can support, because he's willing to look at people as a human being, point blank, period, versus white, Black, or other. So for me, we definitely need to, add everything, everybody, no candidate will be perfect in what we need, but the big needs that we need in this country is making sure that we are definitely healthy, making sure that people can go to school without being in so much debt that they can't, even function after that. It's a whole lot of things that should be done here that need to be done, and he's willing to do that. So I'm sure he'll be able and be open to that conversation after we vote him in.
I want to take away from Yvette's story.
I'm trying to stay on the labor union. I'm trying.
I know, but that's part of our union, because we have to negotiate healthcare, and that's something we wouldn't have to negotiate as labor unions, because that's something that takes away from the wages or the pensions we could have, because we have to fight about benefits. So if that's something we didn't have to fight about anymore as labor unions, that's a big deal.
Make no mistake about it. The number one reason people go into financial crisis is medical. And when your healthcare is tied to your employer, and your employer has access to that, when you get sick, it's a nasty relationship. I've experienced that, because your healthcare, your employer has a package, right? And that healthcare system, whether it's United Healthcare, whoever, doesn't want to lose that employer. So they're going to do what the employer wants them to do. Meanwhile, you're the one who's sick. Yeah. So how do you talk about a conflict of interest? And your question, Tamara, about are people fearful? Again, there's funding, ridiculous amounts of funding that go into marketing that are very strategic, which that's I guess good business to a degree, but it's also a fallacy, because the claims that the company is making, equal opportunity, non-discrimination, no retaliation for whistleblowers, we honor civil rights. Look at what's happening, but it does not get covered because our media, isn't covering it. For example, Delta, if the things that the corporation of Delta is doing, if people did it, would be shamed upon. Before bankruptcy, Delta painted all the airplanes, got all new uniforms, spent a ton of money, and then declared bankruptcy. And guess who pays for that? If you did that as an individual, if Yvette did that as an individual, if anyone did that, we would be looked at as irresponsible people, right? We would. Mm-hmm. But the way that this is spun, it's allowed. There's a lawsuit right now. The flight attendants, ironically, Lucy McBath, hey, Lucy, please stand with Yvette. Lucy McBath was a flight attendant for the airlines. Right now, the flight attendants are having to sue Lanzone, is it?
Lands End.
Lands End, I'm sorry, Lands End, the company that made the uniforms for 25,000 flight attendants for medical issues. Okay.
Right.
Basically, a bunch of flight attendants winds up with rashes. If you're sensitive, they use some type of whatever. And these flight attendants could not refuse to wear uniformed products that the company purchased for them in bulk, even though they were making them sick, on carriers where you're there to help the public and you have a safety role. Where was
that intentional? I don't think they were in the uniforms. The intent. So was it just like a manufacturer defect? Like it was a chemical in the like something happened.
Using formaldehyde and some other things in the products, in the clothing that cause people who are sensitive to those things to be sick. I mean, a whole bunch of sick, not only rashes, migraines. People are having a whole bunch of issues, and now the story is they will be replacing those uniforms, even though they spent millions of dollars having a designer make them, but they will be replacing those because of the lawsuit.
But exactly because of the lawsuit.
Right.
So
only because
they didn't turn around and say, we will fix this. This is our contract with Lands End. We'll take care of this. Your employees, our employees will take care of you. The flight attendants, after being sick, and not being able to call in, being stuck wearing those uniforms, had to file a lawsuit against Lands End, who actually were paid by their company. Right. How does it work?
Right.
This is an interesting comment. She will not.
She will not stand with Yvette. She didn't even stand in the district. When I ran for the 40th. Yeah.
At some of her, events with some signs, with some T-shirts, and ask her directly, where are you on this? Because this is a big deal for our state.
She didn't even sign HR 40, y'all. Like she didn't even sign on to the study for reparations. She didn't even sign on to that. So I'm not surprised that she didn't, stand with you, Yvette. I'm not surprised. I'm saddened.
Very. Yeah.
The only other thing I want to mention is, I don't know if she's got some funding from the airlines. Who knows with Lucy McBath, but currently Ed Bastian is the CEO. And he literally could make a big difference. But the way that this trickled down, the history behind this is usually the CEOs, they're selected, right? So before him, it was Richard Anderson. So the problem in Atlanta is that these CEOs are in direct relationships with our city officials. Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, they sit on her boards for sustainability, for economic commerce. So whatever they're saying to Keisha, oh, that's not happening. But oftentimes the CEOs are insulated. When these people come to headquarters and they go to a bathroom, there is a crowd around them. They don't let the employees directly access. And people like Yvette, who actually try to help they're not only themselves, but their coworkers, they're immediately removed. You're walked off property, you're shut off a system, and now you're cut off. So other people don't know. If Lucy doesn't know, she should, right? But maybe she doesn't. Ed Bastian these days, when there's Twitter and social media, he has to be aware, but he's silent on this. I mean, there was an article the other day, someone wrote an article, tweeted at him, and he helped someone get an interview. She had a loss and wanted to come back to her airline job. So he did something about that. What about Yvette? What about the security of our airport? What about the 90% of our employees that are predominantly people of color who are unprotected, working at a massive transit hub in Atlanta that's our largest employer, where we don't have safety for people can't even protect themselves from wearing a uniform that makes them sick.
Right.
So did they not believe them when they started saying that the uniforms was making them sick? What was that?
Go ahead, Yvette, and then I want to say something.
I just don't think they really cared. I mean, their bottom line is their bottom line. So they're looking at making profits, and they need these people in place to make those profits. So if they're sick and not there, then we can't make the money we want to make. So it shouldn't be ever that the companies are putting the bottom dollar over the people, but that's what you always end up seeing. Unfortunately, that really is the case. They can be replaced, but in the airline industry, thank goodness, it takes training and it's a process in order to get somebody to replace them. So, even though, they can be readily replaced, they may have a few minutes, in order to hang on until they are replaced, but they don't mind replacing anyone to move on to the next. So.
And trust me, they do replace the senior.
People are just disposable.
Well, here's the thing with the uniforms, and Yvette's absolutely right. They need those airplanes to go out. For every minute an airplane is delayed, it's millions. So they can't have a workforce that says, hey, I'm represented. This baggage is illegal. It's, we can't close the bins. This is the rule. If they have a workforce like that, they actually have to make sure the operation is safe. So, and let me tell you, this is not a minor thing with safety. When Yvette brings up the FAA, if you put too many bags and you don't place those bags in the correct place in cargo, that airplane is not going to take off. There's a reason these airlines are skidding off the highway, okay? There's a reason these accidents happen. There's a reason that there's dangerous circumstances and airplanes wind up defective, and it's been reported to Boeing, right? Huge, massive scandal, but nobody's doing anything about it. The systems of the industry during deregulation are connected and intertwined with the FAA, and they look at legacy carriers like you can do no wrong. They let them get away with it when people don't really know what's happening on the bottom rungs. And we all pay for this. We pay to bail them out. We went after bankruptcy. So in Georgia, especially, we are the hub. We're central. We have the West Coast, we have the East Coast. Everything comes through Georgia, right? So if this is our major money maker, why aren't we protecting Georgia taxpayer interests and making sure that our airport runs safely with protections where people can say, hey, this is a dangerous condition and I need to report it without being terminated so I don't lose my house.
Right.
And Lucy McBath, of all people, should know that. Keisha Lance Bottoms, of all people, should be present, should be standing with events, should be calling Ed Bastian, the CEO, and saying, Mr. Bastian, why is this person terminated for her right to legally organize?
Exactly.
And they're not.
No, they're not. It would be great to have that input, but as we see, everybody has their own motives and agendas. So if it doesn't align with what they want to do, they're not interested. And that's very unfortunate for the people who are out here, trying to make a living, just, to put food on their table and make sure their families are covered, to have to deal with, the threat of at any time my job can be taken away, because of whatever, anything.
Do not care. In essence, what it is you put your head down and accept what we give you, because you should be grateful to be here. They'll never say that publicly, but that's what it is. And that's what it is. If you don't like it, you can go somewhere else. Actually, they did say that at some point, but then they stopped saying it because they didn't want people to unionize, but we're spending, right now we have a transportation committee. Okay. Andre Dickens, an Atlanta at-large council person, is the head, right, of a chair of that transportation committee. Yvette has approached Mr. Dickens. Again, Georgia's largest employer. Clayton County schools are literally in almost a crisis. They've lost accreditation. They don't have funding. Clayton County has an affordability issue. 50% of Clayton County is renting. The majority of Clayton County are predominantly, Black. They're African American. A portion of the airport is in Clayton County. Why is Clayton County starving?
Right.
Georgia's largest employer, the money that's made in cargo alone. Why is Clayton County starving? And
they're not giving those jobs to the community. Who's doing those jobs, or they're not paying them? What is the problem? Why? So answer that question you asked, Robby.
If I can answer it, these people can't protect themselves. They're not they can't organize. The people that clean the airplanes, the people that cater the airplanes, these are all subcontracted. They're not paid a living wage. Yvette, go ahead. This is all you.
Yeah, the companies have done a great job in setting up a hierarchy inside where other workers, from the pilots, they set it up where it's pilots, flight attendants, gate and ticket agents, Then you go below wing to the, ramp workers and cargo workers, and then the people who clean the aircraft, people that push the wheelchairs, and they make people so they claim above them look down on them. And that's how it's set up. And the workers are divided in that manner because it's been ingrained throughout. So they have the workers, some from the communities that actually work there, but they're too afraid to make any noise. Now, they're not going to make any noise about this employer because they know they won't have the job. And then they wouldn't have the ability to be able to take care of their family. So those hierarchies are deeply ingrained, and the company's done a great job in that. And until people wake up and realize we are all equal here on the exact same playing field, no matter what our paycheck says or the title we have or the job performance, we need to understand that we're in it together. We have other Delta employees right above us in Canada. They're all unionized, even the ramp workers, and they have a contract, so they're protected. So what's the difference? Are they better than us in Canada? No, they're workers just like we are that deserve to have that representation. So people need to realize it's a reason why they pay so much money to fight to keep unions out, and that's very obvious. You have that much money to spend to pay anti-union lawyers and companies and firms to do things, then you have the money to help your people take care of themselves and have retirements and things of that nature.
And we're fortunate that Yvette has not allowed this to deter her, because most of the times once a lawsuit happens and it settles, the people are legally gagged, right? I mean, I was there to legally gag me, and I just didn't sign it. I didn't agree with it, and that was it. But all you have to do is look at the actions. And again, this is a Georgia issue. This is a taxpayer issue. This is a public safety issue. This is a health risk issue. If the ramp workers aren't protected and they can't say, hey, these bags are overweight, and if we place them this way, it's dangerous, and that goes against blah, blah, and an agent is telling them, I got to get the plane out, close the door. I have seen doors slammed in front of flight attendants' faces where we don't have, where the closet is so overstuffed with baggage because nobody's regulating it. Seriously. And so how do you think people wind up on flights and they're like, oh, they didn't have a ticket on there? Because they're just shoving the people in the airplanes, get the flight out, because nobody can take a delay. Nobody except the pilot. Why? Because a pilot is protected. So it's time for Atlanta, for our city, for our state to make sure to protect our interests as taxpayers and make sure that our largest employer, the airport, has a living wage, is not paying people who cater, who clean, who do security, forcing them to go airplane to airplane for not even a living wage, $15 an hour. These corporations can afford it. The money that they are spending on anti-union, the money that they are spending on legal fees to fight people like Yvette, who exercised her legal right, to terminate her. She is a line of people that this has happened to. Kip Hedges, Google Kip Hedges. He was terminated, legally gagged right now. This airport impacts us all, and we pay for it all. I have no reason to pay for Ed Bastian or his former counterpart, Richard Anderson, to have 7 houses and a helicopter and 3 boats. Okay. We don't have to do that. We can pay our people who live by Clayton County, our schools, our roads, our police forces, our affordability crisis. That money can go to the people of Atlanta. So Andre Dickens, the Transportation Committee, Lucy McBath, Keisha Lance Bottoms, where are you? Step up for the people of Atlanta and Georgia.
That's a mic drop right there, Robby.
It definitely is. Definitely.
I'm very passionate about this.
As well you should be. We need that passion to catch on. We really do.
I don't think people realize the impact that this can have on people. The loss of a job you can get foreclosed on. You can lose your home. You can lose your car. You feel like you're lost of dignity. Yvette shouldn't be going through this. And she is.
Wage garnishments. You wondering if you can keep food in your house, lights, and that's reality. People don't work 2 jobs just for fun. You work 2 jobs because it's a necessity. So I did definitely ask those people in the room when they were letting me go, which one of you would want to make that decision right now for you and your family? Nobody wants to be in that position. So they should never, do that to anyone else. And the room basically went silent because they know nobody wants to be put in this position. to have
You
to
were
choose
targeted
jobs.
though. But you were
Right.
targeted. Like you were targeted.
Definitely.
Like you were trying to organize. You were trying to get people engaged, and you were really doing some great things. And you were a threat to their
Yeah.
entire infrastructure. So you were targeted.
Yeah.
And I've
And that
seen it
does.
before. It
Yeah.
it is an MO. And those people in that room, Yvette, none of them were contract. HR is not contract. So they couldn't do anything because
No.
if they didn't execute what the corporation told them to do, they'd be out the door too.
Exactly. And that's why I always tell people, yeah, they're looking out for themselves as well. They have to. They have to do as they are told because it's at will. So at any time they could be next.
And that is to some degree why, the corporation is headquartered here. Again, this is
Oh
strategic
yeah.
because they could be headquartered in LA, but this shit don't fly. Sorry. This don't fly in LA because it's not a right to work state. They have more
No.
protection. So there are literally people who are based out of LA who will file their lawsuits in LA because they know the courts are not hostile, right? In LA. That's why our judge appointments are so important.
Yes. Very
So,
much so.
Tamara, you were going to speak a little bit about the beauty and barber industry and deregulation and the correlations a bit, right?
I was going to mention the coronavirus because how are our flight attendants and our airport workers and as a whole, like they are most exposed with the world's busiest airport. They're targets now. I mean, literally, like how Yvette, speak on that. Tell us, like,
Well, I
have you heard
know
any concerns?
I'm still an airport employee because my other job at UPS is at the airport, even though we don't have to deal with passengers per se, but people are even panicking because the claims of, an Amazon worker in a warehouse supposedly tested positive for coronavirus. So they're worried about the packages coming from different places to see if that was a way to, to give it to somebody else. So they did a PCM is what they call it, a pre-communication meeting yesterday for us at UPS to try to tell us how to make sure to keep ourselves safe. I know Delta had a meeting a couple of days ago as well, trying to give out information, but are they providing anything for you to, help yourselves? No. That's something that you're not getting. So, I don't think they believe it's appropriate for a gate agent to have on gloves or a mask or, even though they say masks are really not the best, option, but having, things in place to save yourself or protect your employees would be great. But other than just telling people, wash your hands and do normal things that you should to avoid getting sick is basically all I think the airlines are even saying to people, which is a problem.
So I heard on NPR that there was some factory somewhere that shut down and literally did like this real deep dive cleaning. Have you heard about any parts of the airport or UPS, any of these places that are like being proactive and saying, you know what, let's do a deep cleaning and come up with some sort of regimen to where we're cleaning, like, have you heard of any of that kind of stuff
No,
happening?
not that I'm aware of. I hadn't heard anything about that.
The bottom line is that the airport, our airport, the Atlanta airport, the busiest airport in the world, which has a monopoly in Atlanta. The airline, the biggest airline, Delta, has a monopoly in Atlanta. We are not handling our airport we're not handling the airport or managing the airport in a way that views it as a risk to public health. Because if we were, we would be paying or public national security. Our security people, our caterers, our cleaners, who all have access to the airlines, would have a living wage, would have $15 an hour. If we view the airport in the reality that it is, a risk to public health, a risk to national security, a risk to safety, and we're treating it as such, we would not allow the companies, specifically Delta Airlines, to subcontract and pay non-livable wages to people around the airport who are predominantly Black people. These are the residents of Atlanta. And there's no reason, given the money that is produced out of that airport, and the money that our executives at Delta Airlines are making, and the money that the pilots are making at Delta Airlines, who are protected, and everyone else is not protected, and yet people who provide labor, a service, Labor has value. That's the whole point of the labor movement. Whether you're putting plates on an airplane, cleaning an airplane, pushing a wheelchair, you are interacting with the general public, which has risks. Whether you're a flight attendant forced to wear some uniform that's making you sick, you're there for a safety component. That's what the FAA says, primary safety. And then you're there to serve the public. You are there with 250 people traveling all over the world. You should have the right to say, hey, this is making me sick, or this is unsafe, and not be terrified that you're going to lose your job, your retirement, your benefits, and how are you going to feed your family?
Yeah. I want to read. So this is a colleague from the beauty and barber industry. She says, beauty and barbers need to clean stations, chairs, doors after each client, keep hand sanitizer before and after each client, plus an initiative to ask your stylist to wash his or her hands. So I think, that should be something across the board, not just my industry, the beauty and barber industry, but, those airport workers are, we got to do all these extra steps to make sure that we're keeping ourselves safe, since the employer isn't really being proactive in doing so.
Well, and then Trump was just here, our president was just here in Atlanta visiting the CDC because of the 2 people who were infected, now quarantined, who flew in, from Italy through our airport, and that's how coronavirus came to Georgia. So if people are not put it together, that airport needs to be managed in a safe way. People cannot be fearful to report unsafe conditions. You can't have a policy that says zero tolerance or zero retaliation for whistleblowers and then terminate whistleblowers.
Right.
And walk them off property and shut them out.
Again, Robby, zero
retaliation for whistleblowers, meaning, let's say you report an unsafe condition. And I'm very familiar with this. I used to work for the airline. I used to do special projects, worked with entering emerging markets, diversity, etc. And in essence, they're supposed to not retaliate against whistleblowers. So if you report something that's unsafe, right? Unsafe conditions, things that would impact the public and so on, you zero retaliation, meaning you can't be retaliated against if you do that. Well, they have a theory, right? A policy that's in writing.
And then they turn around and fire Yvette.
And then turn around, and when you say, hey, this is the way it is, you're like, no, that's not the way it is, because we have this policy where we don't retaliate. But you did. Right. Otherwise, she would be employed. Otherwise, I would have retirement from there. Otherwise, Kip Hedges wouldn't have been terminated. And we could go on with the names. So, people like Yvette are taking, I don't understand why most people don't see this. Well, there's a huge media spin on this. The marketing is, and I used to work in their market, it's incredible. But let's look at the reality of it. That's why we need our leaders like Lucy McBath. If she's familiar with the airlines, our leaders, an at-large councilman, Andre Dickens, who's the head of the Transportation Committee, has a responsibility to the city at large. This falls under his purview. Where is he? Where is Andre Dickens with you, Yvette? I mean, you met him directly. What's that?
I've met him. I've sent letters explaining what's going on. I haven't received any other feedback from him other than those face-to-face just chats. It was, nothing else has been done or said to let me know that he's pursued anything, he's looked into anything when it comes to how Delta Airlines is treating employees or what's going on out there. It involves his security or health risk. Hadn't heard anything about that from him.
I want to say something, not to stir the pot. I just want to say something because I think it's interesting. Mm-hmm. So Andre Dickens is a Black man. Lucy McBath, is she not a woman of color?
Yes, she is.
Okay. Keisha Lance Bottoms is a Black woman.
Yeah.
The people being maligned the most at the corporation of Delta Airlines, the below wing people, the counties, Clayco, these are predominantly people of color. This is why I think when we decide who we're going to support, and it's the reason why I'm supporting Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders stood with Yvette. He came out publicly and said, this is wrong. Tweeted at Delta Airlines and said, this is wrong. You should allow your folks to organize, to protect themselves because it's safer for everybody. He's not Black, but he did it.
Yeah.
So I think actions speak louder than anything else these days.
Definitely.
Yvette, I'm going to continue to support you and follow you. And I thank you for coming out with this as a Georgia taxpayer, as someone who lives by the airport, as someone who wants to travel and not get sick, and as someone who still knows people at that airline and doesn't want anybody to go through what I've seen so many people experience and really sometimes not recover from. I was fortunate. I was very fortunate, but this shouldn't be happening at all. There's so much money over there. There's money for everybody. There's no reason why caterers should be paid a minimum wage when they're working at the world's busiest airport and Georgia's largest employer.
Very true. I definitely appreciate, like I said, the platform, Tamara. And I do want to say congratulations in person for actually getting your campaign going. I wish you much success. I definitely have your back when it comes to that, because we have to support. We have to support one another for the people we know that are truly real and do believe in, workers and this state and how we need to make these changes. We definitely need to support that all the way around every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Yvette, for joining us. You can find Yvette, go to her hashtag Stand with Yvette, reach out to her on social media, Yvette Avery. We got to stand together if we're going to fight these powers. So thank you, Yvette, for just staying in this and not giving up. Because I know this has been a tremendous undertaking. This has been quite a number of years. This is not just today. This has been a long time that you've been fighting this battle. So thank you.
Anytime. Thank you all.
Thank you. Robby.
Thank
you for being my co-host today.
Thank you for having me. To your point, Samira, that's usually what happens legally. They drag out the legal lawsuits for years where you're paying ridiculous and legal fees. And, people just drop off. And there's no reason this should be happening. And people like Yvette can make a difference, but the fact she did her part. Our elected officials didn't do their part. Like Keisha Lance Bottoms, she could make a phone call to Ed Bastian and say, "What is this?" He sits on her advisory board. That's the CEO of Delta. What's the problem?
We got to stand for our workers. I'm a strong supporter of labor. So whatever I can do federally, I will be doing that for labor. And I'm just glad Yvette is continuing to speak truth to power, because her story is not unique, and we got to keep a light on this and those elected officials that aren't doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, I agree. I'm baffled at it because it's such a risk in general to all of us in Georgia. There's a reason why the state wants to take control over the airport. The funding out of the airport is ridiculous. So we should not be handling it like a modern day, plantation. That's what our airport is being managed like, and it's unacceptable.
So on that note, Robby, we're almost at the top of the hour. Anything you want to share? We got a couple minutes left. Anything you want to share? What's going on? I know real estate is your lane and your vein, and what's going on before we go?
Just please, the whole affordability crisis, please know that this has been manipulated. Please know that, again, this is an industry issue. That's, again, why I'm in favor of a particular candidate, because he's discussing all these problematic systemic components in the layers, whether it's criminal justice, whether it's labor, or whether it's hopefully in the future reparations. He's addressing all of these student loan debt, the pharmaceuticals. This is all large scale systemic issues, and it's all kind of being dismantled. So with real estate, it's no different. We literally in Atlanta have created an affordability crisis. It's national. We're allowing again, huge corporations, legacy corporations to make bank, and then we, the public, fund affordable housing because it's not regulated. And again, we've reached out to the mayor to provide this background information. Again, there's people who talk about this are targeted. You have to change brokerships, the way that it's constructed. You're not allowed to talk about this. And we, again, the public, then fund millions of dollars through federal relief to make affordable housing to pay for the homelessness crisis that we've created due to lack of regulation in the industry. And for a minute, I kind of wanted to just step back because I was helping people get into houses, and then those people weren't helping other people. And it made me feel like I don't want to do this anymore. But now that the discussions are coming up around affordability and people are starting to look into, maybe there's a problem with agent investors, people who operate licensed and then go and invest for themselves and don't show those houses to the public. Maybe that's a problem if they're gobbling up all the inventory, which is causing the affordability crisis. Maybe this wholesaling, this huge industry where people don't have licenses and they're just being paid to assign contracts, huge money that's not being regulated, where people are losing the equity in their home, that should be regulated. But again, we've submitted to Ms. Bottom, our mayor, Ms. Bottom, we've been waiting 6 months, over 6 months for a promised meeting to discuss these very issues. Yvette is a labor specialist and an expert. You know, she would basically serve as an opinion expert on the airport. She wants to meet with Keisha. Keisha has promised to meet over 6 months ago on camera, and we are still waiting for these meetings while we fund the consequences as taxpayers, as Georgia taxpayers.
I want you to stay in the fight, Robby. I want you to not give up. I want you to continue to speak truth to power, because we're not gonna, we're never gonna let them win, and we're gonna continue to hammer. And I thank you for continuing to be an advocate and being a voice in the community and right here in Georgia and in Atlanta. So thank you, Robby, for all you do. David will be back with me next week. Robby, you can come back anytime you want, girl. I am. Yes, I am. Robby has a new website, robbycaban.com. Check her out. David will be back with me real soon. You can find David at Acknowledge the Divide right here on Facebook. And I am Tamara Johnson Shealy, your candidate for the United States Senate right here in this great state of Georgia. Robby?
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great week, everybody.